Colorists are kind of hard to come by. A lot of times when I meet someone who's a filmmaker and I tell them that I'm a colorist, they say something like, oh wow, I don't know any colorists. I've always been looking for a colorist. It's kind of hard to find a colorist. It's kind of a niche job in the industry, but it is so important at the same time. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Evan Schneider and I hope you're all doing well. Today in this video, I want to talk about how to work with a professional colorist. If you take the time to get a proper color grade, it'll really pay off. A lot of filmmakers are pretty unfamiliar with this process, so being a professional colorist myself, I thought I would talk about it and kind of try to demystify some of the workflow and the process that goes into color grading a film. So in this video, I'm going to cover how to find a colorist, how to communicate your vision to your colorist, how to shoot your project with the color grade in mind, how to deliver your project to the colorist, how much time you should budget for the color grade, the best way to do revisions with a colorist and how specific you can get and what kind of things you can communicate to them, how to receive the files back from your colorist and finish your project, and finally how to credit the colorist and share their work so that both you and the colorist can get more work in the future. So with that, let's get into it. So there's a few ways to find a colorist. Obviously, word of mouth and recommendations are always one of the top ways to get work and to find other people in the industry. But oftentimes, nobody knows a colorist, and so what do you do from there? I would recommend actually looking on Instagram. There's a few common hashtags that colorists tend to use. Some of them are frames with a Z. You can also look up color grade or color graders, DaVinci Resolve. Once I go into those hashtags, I always look for the triptych style of posting. Basically, that's like the 3 or 4 images stacked on top of each other. As a colorist, I really love posting triptychs because it's a great way to showcase a consistent color grade across multiple shots. So what I would recommend is to look through all of those images, look for the triptychs that especially stand out to you, and go into that profile, see who did it, scroll down to the description and look through the credits and see if you can actually find the colorist who's tagged. I think a lot of the great colorists that I know and that I even look up to, they have incredible Instagram accounts, and it's a great way to find a colorist. The other thing that you can do is to go onto Vimeo or YouTube and find some of your favorite filmmakers, and then you can figure out the videos that they've liked and kind of go through the Vimeo liking rabbit hole. Keep searching and searching until you find a cinematographer or a colorist, and usually once you find them, you can Google them and find their website or their email or something like that to be able to reach out to them. Once you find a colorist, the next thing you're going to want to do is to communicate your vision for the film to the colorist. Now, this can be kind of an uncomfortable task because you may not be especially familiar with technical color grading terms. If you find a good colorist, part of the job of a colorist, in my opinion, is to take whatever words that the director or the DP is using and translate them into technical color terms. But one of the most powerful ways to communicate your vision for your own film to the colorist is to actually just use visual references. Now, this can be sending over a reference film, and the colorist can use those stills to base the grade off of. It's so important to communicate your vision for the film to your colorist because it can eliminate a lot of the back and forth process that happens when you go to review the finished color work, because there's so many different ways for a colorist to interpret a scene and to color it. The next thing you want to do, if you haven't shot your film yet, is to make sure that you shoot the film with color grading in mind. It's all about the source. So this means like shooting in the highest quality possible, and since you're hiring a colorist who probably knows how to color grade log footage, you probably want to shoot in log to give the most flexibility to the colorist in the color grade. If the colorist doesn't have a good source, they're mainly going to be doing more of a salvage job than actually being able to be creative and develop a specific look for your film. If you want even extra credit, go to your location and find similar lighting conditions and even shoot a little bit of test footage and then deliver those files to the colorist and work together on developing a look beforehand. That way, going into it, you can make informed decisions on lighting, even on wardrobe and set design, on the type of colors and the mood that you want to give in the film. This is an incredibly powerful way to be able to shoot with the color grade in mind, and you're going to get a better product for it. So once you've shot and edited your film, the next thing you're going to need to do is deliver the files to the colorist. Now, this can be one of the biggest roadblocks for filmmakers and one of the biggest reasons why a lot of filmmakers just choose to color it themselves, maybe throw on a LUT or just do a quick color pass and call it good and send it off. Now, I'm not going to go completely in depth, but let me know if you have any questions in the comments. So the first way to deliver your files to the colorist is to simply export a QuickTime and an EDL. And so basically your colorist is going to take that QuickTime and use the EDL to chop it back up into individual clips so that they can color them separately. This workflow is great because you don't have to deliver the raw camera files to the colorist, but you want to make sure when you're exporting your QuickTime that you're referencing the full quality footage and you're rendering at a lossless format. So you want to be using ProRes 422 HQ or ProRes 4444 if possible. You also want to make sure that you've disabled any temporary color corrections that you've made on the footage, but you can keep things like warp stabilizer. You also want to make sure that you disable any titles so that the color grade doesn't affect those titles and you can add them back later. The next way that you can deliver your project is to, of course, deliver the full quality footage along with an XML export from your final timeline. The colorist can use that XML to rebuild your timeline with the raw footage. If they're working remotely, you can send them a hard drive or drop it off. Or if the project is small enough, you can always upload it and have them download it. Now, this way is obviously one of the best ways to do it because the colorist is referencing the actual raw footage, especially if you shot on a camera that can shoot in RAW like the Red or the Blackmagic Cinema cameras, where the colorist can actually access the metadata and say change white balance or ISO or the color science of that footage. But it also does take a little bit more time to deliver it because you have to figure out how to get them the raw footage. In either case, that's probably the hardest part. And so if you make it through that, you are good to go. So once the colorist has the footage and the project and everything set up, they're going to need time to go through and color grade. Unfortunately, the color grade can be one of the last steps in the process, which means that deadlines can get pretty close. If possible, you want to make sure that the colorist has enough time to actually sit through and not be rushed doing that creative process, because this really is the polishing of your final film. And the colorist's job is to create consistency across different shots, and also to create a look for your film that conveys emotion and kind of disappears so that the audience can focus on what your film is about. You also want to make sure that you have enough time for revisions. So you want to be very specific with your notes to your colors in the revision process. I love to use Frame.io for my revision process because it gives the client ultimate flexibility to add notes, to pinpoint where exactly in the frame they're talking about, and you can actually even draw lines and shapes and circle different things in the image that you want to change, so there's no questions on what the colorist needs to do. Some things that you can have notes for are things like brightening a face, or say you want some scene to be a little bit warmer or cooler. You can really ask your colorist anything at this point. I recommend watching the film all the way through first. Remember, this is the final step of polishing the project that you've put so much work into. So yeah, definitely use Frame.io for that process. So when the colorist has actually finished the job, they're going to need to deliver it back to you. So this is where you need to think about whether or not you need to add titles back in, or if you need to export different versions of that project. So there's two main ways for the colorist to send the project back to you. The first way is for them to just export another lossless QuickTime file and upload it for you to download. You can then take that file and drop it back into your timeline underneath your titles, and basically export a version from there. The other way that a colorist can send it back to you, if you want a little more flexibility, is to do a round trip workflow. Basically, if the colorist has the raw clips that you've sent, they can actually export those raw clips individually, and they can even export them with handles on either side. This basically allows you to make small adjustments back in the edit. You have that flexibility and it's not all locked in. Finally, once your project is posted and completed, you want to make sure that you can give your colorist proper credit. And another thing that's really helpful is that if you have social versions of your film, feel free to send them to the colorist. I love receiving different edits of the final film because all I have is kind of the colored stage, which isn't quite the end of it. This way you can make sure that everybody gets credited and you can help each other get more work through word of mouth or through Instagram or Vimeo or wherever you end up posting that video if you do post it online. A lot of times I've worked with clients who have spent months editing the raw footage or footage with some sort of random LUT on it, and they get it back from the color grade and they're just amazed at how much better it looks, how consistent it looks, and how much I've been able to bring out of the image to make it look that much better. So the color grading process is incredibly important, even though it can be intimidating and time consuming to try to find a colorist and go through that whole process. Right as you're nearing completion of the project, it's so tempting to just do it yourself and send it off. You want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your image, out of your camera, and creating the best product possible. So I hope this video was helpful and that it kind of demystifies the color process for you. If you ever need a colorist, let me know, because I am a colorist and I would love to color your film. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.